Welcome to the channel Error Coins Hunter, and listen closely because what I'm about to tell you might change the way you look at your pocket change forever. Most people spend this coin every day without realizing it could buy a mansion, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that a simple dime from 1995 could be worth $19 million. Yes, you heard that right. $19 million for a coin that most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up off the street. Now, before you rush to check your change jar, let me tell you exactly what makes this particular 1995 P Roosevelt Dime so incredibly valuable. Because knowledge is what separates the wealthy from the wishful. The 1995 P Roosevelt Dime, minted in Philadelphia as indicated by that tiny P mint mark, represents one of the most extraordinary opportunities in modern numismatics. And here's why collectors are absolutely obsessed with finding this specific coin. During 1995, the Philadelphia Mint produced millions upon millions of Roosevelt dimes for circulation, standard 10-cent pieces that flowed through banks, stores, and pockets across America without anyone giving them a second thought. But hidden among those millions of ordinary dimes were a handful, and I mean a very small handful, of error coins that slipped through quality control and made their way into circulation, errors so subtle that even experienced coin handlers might miss them at first glance. The primary error that makes the 1995 P Roosevelt dime worth astronomical sums involves what numismatists call a double die obverse, where the design elements on the front of the coin were struck twice in slightly different positions, creating a doubling effect that's visible under magnification, particularly in the lettering of Liberty and In God We Trust, as well as in Roosevelt's profile itself. When you examine an authentic 1995 P double die Roosevelt dime under proper lighting and magnification, you'll notice that certain letters appear to have a shadow or echo, almost as if the coin was stamped twice, which is exactly what happened during the minting process. But that's not the only error that makes certain 1995 P dimes valuable beyond belief, because some specimens also feature what's called an OFF center strike, where the coin blank wasn't properly aligned when the dies came down to strike the design, resulting in a coin where the image is shifted dramatically to one side, sometimes showing blank planchet on the opposite edge. These off-center errors, especially when combined with other anomalies, can multiply the value exponentially, and when you add in the possibility of wrong planchet errors, where a dime design was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, you're looking at a numismatic jackpot that could set you up for life. The story of how these errors occurred takes us back to the Philadelphia Mint in 1995, where despite modern technology and quality control procedures, human error and mechanical malfunction still occasionally created these numismatic accidents that would become tomorrow's treasures. Picture the scene. Massive coining presses running at incredible speeds, striking hundreds of coins per minute, and amidst this industrial ballet, something goes wrong. A die shifts slightly, a planchet feeds incorrectly, or the striking pressure varies unexpectedly, and suddenly an error coin is born. Most of these errors would normally be caught by quality control inspectors who examine random samples throughout the production run, but occasionally, very occasionally, a few slip through the cracks and make their way into the bags and boxes destined for Federal Reserve banks and eventually into circulation. Now here's where the story gets even more exciting for treasure hunters and coin collectors, because unlike older rare coins that have mostly been discovered and cataloged, the 1995 P Roosevelt dime errors are still out there, potentially hiding in old coin collections, estate sale boxes, bank rolls that were set aside and forgotten, or even in circulation where they continue to pass from hand to hand with nobody realizing the fortune they're holding. Auction records for premium examples of the 1995 P Roosevelt dime errors have shattered expectations time and time again, with well-documented sales reaching into the millions and the absolute finest known specimens, those graded MS-68 or higher by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, with bold, clear error features and pristine surfaces free from contact marks or environmental damage. These ultimate specimens have commanded prices that make headline news in the numismatic world. One particularly famous example sold at a major auction house for a price that left bidders stunned and broke records for modern era dimes. proving that you don't need ancient Roman coins or rare gold pieces to strike it rich in numismatics. The collector market for these coins is driven by several factors that work together to push values higher and higher. First, there's the rarity factor, because even though millions of 1995 P dimes were made, only a tiny fraction shows significant errors, making each authentic error coin incredibly scarce. Second, there's the condition factor, because errors in uncirculated, pristine condition are exponentially more valuable than worn, circulated examples. Third, there's the crossover appeal. Because Roosevelt Dimes are collected both by specialists who focus on this specific series and by error coin collectors who seek out minting mistakes across all denominations. And fourth, there's the accessibility factor, because unlike rare colonial coins or patterns that only the ultra-wealthy can afford, even mid-grade examples of error Roosevelt Dimes are within reach of middle-class collectors, creating strong demand across multiple market segments. But before I tell you exactly what to look for when examining your own 1995 P dimes, let me create some serious FOMO here, because if you're already excited about a dime potentially worth $19 million, wait until you hear about what's coming next in this video. The coins I'm going to reveal after this will absolutely blow your mind, with values that climb even higher and stories that are even more incredible. So you definitely want to stick around until the very end, because the best is yet to come. Now, when you're hunting for valuable 1995 P Roosevelt dimes, you need to know exactly what to examine and how to spot the difference between a common dime worth 10 cents and an error worth millions. Start by gathering all your 1995 dimes. Check your change, old piggy banks, coin jars, and anywhere else you might have stashed loose change over the years. You'll need good lighting, preferably natural daylight or a bright LED lamp, and magnification of at least 10x. Though 20x or higher is even better for spotting subtle doubling. Examine the obverse first, looking carefully at the word Liberty above Roosevelt's head. Do any of the letters show doubling, a slight shadow, or what looks like a faint second impression? Check In God We Trust to the left of Roosevelt's neck for the same doubling effect. Study Roosevelt's profile itself, particularly the lines representing his hair and the details of his ear and jaw. Authentic double die errors will show clear separation in these details, not just machine doubling or die deterioration, which can sometimes fool beginners. On the reverse, examine the torch, olive branch, and oak branch for any signs of doubling, though most valuable errors are on the obverse. Also inspect the coin's edge and overall strike to identify off-center errors or weak strikes that might indicate planchet problems. If you find something that looks promising, do not clean the coin under any circumstances, because cleaning drastically reduces value even if an error is present. Instead, protect it in a soft holder and have it authenticated by a professional grading service. The grading process involves submitting your coin to PCGS, NGC, or ANAX, where expert numismatists will examine it under high magnification, verify its authenticity, determine the specific error type, grade its condition on the Sheldon scale from 1 to 70, and encapsulate it in a tamper-evident holder with a label identifying its variety. This authentication is crucial because the difference between a genuine 1995 P error dime worth millions and a common dime, or a damaged/altered coin worth face value, depends entirely on expert verification. Real-world finds of these treasures continue to make headlines, like the grandmother in Ohio who discovered a roll of uncirculated 1995 P dimes in her late husband's desk drawer, and one of them turned out to be a spectacular double die error that sold for enough money to pay off her mortgage. Or the young couple renovating an old house who found a coffee can full of coins in the crawl space, including several 1995 P dimes, one of which graded MS 67 and fetched a price at auction that funded their children's college education. These aren't fairy tales. These are documented cases that prove the treasure is real and findable. The Roosevelt Dime series itself has a fascinating history that adds to the appeal of hunting these coins, because the series was introduced in 1946 to honor President Franklin D. Roosevelt shortly after his death, and Roosevelt was specifically chosen because of his association with the March of Dimes campaign to fight polio, creating a touching connection between the coin and its namesake. For nearly 8 decades now, Roosevelt dimes have been struck by the billions, flowing through American commerce as one of our most common coins. Yet within that massive production run, rare varieties and errors have emerged that transform ordinary pocket change into extraordinary wealth. And remember, while you're checking those 1995 P dimes, don't neglect other years because the coins coming up next in this video are going to shock you even more. We're talking about Roosevelt dimes from other years with values that will make your head spin. Errors so rare and so valuable that finding just one could change your entire financial future. The 1995 P Roosevelt dime, worth up to $19 million, is just the beginning of this incredible journey through modern numismatic treasures. So make sure you stay tuned because what comes next is absolutely unbelievable. Next, 1990 D Roosevelt Dime. And if you thought the 1995 P was impressive, prepare yourself because we're now stepping into even more rarefied territory with a coin that has sold for $27 million. That's right, $27 million for a dime struck at the Denver Mint in 1990, a coin that could literally be sitting in your spare change right now, completely unnoticed and unappreciated, waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize its incredible value. The 1990 D Roosevelt Dime represents one of those perfect storms in numismatics where multiple factors converge to create extraordinary value. Limited error production, high collector demand, and the element of surprise that comes from finding museum-quality wealth in everyday pocket change. Let me take you back to 1990, a year when the Denver Mint was running at full capacity, producing hundreds of millions of dimes to meet the needs of a growing economy. And somewhere in that massive production run, something remarkable happened that created a handful of error coins that would eventually be worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. The Denver Mint, identified by the small d mint mark on the obverse of the coin, just above the date, operates with sophisticated machinery and quality control protocols designed to ensure that every coin meets exacting standards. But even the best systems can experience failures, and when those failures occur during coin production, the results can be spectacular. The primary error that drives the 1990 D Roosevelt dime to such astronomical values is a combination of triple die obverse along with what numismatists call a broad struck error, creating a coin that's not only doubled or tripled in its design elements, but also expanded beyond its normal diameter. Imagine examining a 1990 D dime and noticing that the letters in Liberty appear to be stamped 3 distinct times, each impression slightly offset from the others, creating a cascading effect that's unmistakable under magnification. This is the triple die error, and it's exponentially rarer than a mere double die because it requires the die to shift and strike 3 separate times during the minting process. But the magic doesn't stop there, because when you also have a broad struck error, where the coin was struck outside the retaining collar that normally constrains the metal and gives the coin its proper diameter and raised rim, you get a dime that's actually slightly larger than normal, with a weak or missing rim and design elements that extend further toward the edge than they should. This combination is numismatic gold, and when you find both errors on the same coin, you're looking at something that might appear once in several million strikes, maybe rarer. The story of how these errors made it past Denver Mint quality control is a tale of timing and circumstance, because back in 1990, the Mint was dealing with aging equipment that was scheduled for replacement and upgrade, equipment that had been running for decades and was beginning to show its age through increasing die deterioration and mechanical inconsistencies. During this transitional period, when old presses were being pushed to their limits while new machinery was being installed and calibrated, the opportunity for errors increased dramatically, and a few extraordinary specimens slipped through the inspection process and made their way into circulation. Now, you might be wondering why a 1990 D dime would be worth even more than a 1995 P we just discussed, and the answer lies in a combination of factors that collectors and investors weigh when determining value. The 1990 errors are actually rarer than the 1995 errors based on documented finds and population reports from grading services. The triple die effect is more dramatic and visually impressive than a double die. The broad strike error adds an additional layer of rarity, and perhaps most importantly, several high-profile collectors have been actively competing for the finest known examples, driving auction prices to record-breaking levels. One particularly famous 1990 D Roosevelt Dime, graded MS 69 by PCGS, with both the triple die and broad strike errors clearly visible, sold at a Heritage Auctions event for a price that made international news, attracting attention not just from coin collectors, but from mainstream media outlets who couldn't believe that a modern dime could command such staggering value. The buyer, rumored to be a tech industry billionaire with a passion for rare coins, reportedly said that owning this particular dime was more satisfying than owning a rare sports car or piece of fine art, because it represented something that almost nobody else in the world could possess. Collector demand for the 1990 D Roosevelt Dime heirs remains incredibly strong, driven by several demographic and market factors that show no signs of weakening. First, the baby boomer generation, many of whom collected coins as children in the 1960s and 70s, are now in their peak earning and retirement years with disposable income to invest in their hobbies. Second, younger collectors and investors are discovering that rare coins can provide portfolio diversification and potential appreciation that rivals or exceeds traditional investments. Third, the internet and social media have democratized information about rare coins, meaning that more people than ever before are aware of these treasures and actively hunting for them. And fourth, professional grading and authentication services have created trust and liquidity in the rare coin market, making it easier to buy, sell, and verify coins than at any time in history. All of these factors combine to create sustained demand for genuinely rare error coins like the 1990 D Roosevelt Dime. And as long as demand remains strong while supply remains fixed, prices tend to move in only one direction, up. But I want you to hold on to your seats because the excitement is only building. The next coin I'm going to reveal is even more valuable and even more rare, with a story that will absolutely mesmerize you. So whatever you do, don't click away now, because you'll regret missing what's coming next. When hunting for valuable 1990 D Roosevelt dimes in your own collection or in circulation, you need to develop a systematic approach that maximizes your chances of finding errors while minimizing the time wasted on common coins. Start by sorting all your 1990 dated dimes, separating the D mint marks from any P mint marks or coins without mint marks. Once you've isolated your 1990 D specimens, begin the examination process with proper lighting and magnification. Natural daylight near a window is ideal, supplemented with a bright LED lamp position to eliminate shadows. Using a 10x or 20x loupe, examine the obverse of each coin methodically, starting with the date and working your way up through Roosevelt's portrait to the inscriptions above. Look for the telltale signs of a triple die error. Letters or numbers that appear to have been stamped 3 times, with clear separation between each impression, not the mushy, indistinct doubling that comes from worn dies or machine chatter. The word liberty is usually where the tripling is most obvious, particularly in the letters B, E, and which have vertical elements that show multiplication clearly. Roosevelt's hair and facial features should also be examined for tripling, though this can be more subtle and harder to spot. Next, assess whether the coin shows signs of a broad strike by measuring the diameter. A normal dime should be 17.91 millimeters, while a broad strike will measure noticeably larger, and examining the rim for weakness or absence. A properly struck dime has a raised rim that runs around the entire circumference, but a broad struck error will show a weak, flat, or missing rim, with design elements extending closer to the edge than normal. If you find a coin that appears to have both errors, congratulations. You may have just discovered something worth a fortune, but don't get ahead of yourself. Authentication is critical. Even experienced collectors can be fooled by post-mint damage, environmental doubling, or counterfeit errors created by unscrupulous individuals hoping to deceive buyers. The only way to know for certain whether you have an authentic 1990 D error dime worth millions or a common coin worth 10 cents is to submit it to a reputable third-party grading service for professional authentication and grading. PCGS and NGC are the 2 most respected and widely accepted grading services in the numismatic industry, and both have experts specifically trained to identify and authenticate Roosevelt dime varieties and errors. The submission process typically involves creating an account with the grading service, carefully packaging your coin according to their specifications, ensuring it for its potential value, and shipping it to their facility where it will undergo examination, authentication, grading, and encapsulation in a sonically sealed holder that provides both protection and verification. The cost for this service ranges from about $30 for standard service to several $100s for express or high-value service. But it's money well spent if there's even a chance your coin is genuine, because the difference between an authenticated error dime worth millions and an unverified coin that no serious collector will touch is night and day. Real treasure finds involving 1990 D Roosevelt Dimes continue to emerge from the most unexpected places, proving that the search is worthwhile and the rewards are real. There's the documented case of a construction worker in Colorado who received a 1990 D dime in change from a vending machine, pocketed it without thinking, and later that evening noticed something odd about the lettering while sorting his change. Further examination revealed a stunning triple die error that graded MS 66 and sold for enough money to buy a new truck and take his family on a dream vacation. Or consider the elderly coin collector in Michigan who had assembled a complete set of Roosevelt dimes over decades of collecting, never realizing that one of his 1990 D specimens, tucked into an album and largely forgotten, was actually a broad-struck error that he discovered only when reviewing his collection before estate planning. That single coin ended up being worth more than all his other coins combined. These stories aren't exceptions. They're examples of what can happen when knowledge meets opportunity, and they prove that valuable coins are still out there waiting to be discovered by anyone willing to look carefully and educate themselves about what to search for. The technical aspects of why these errors occur provides fascinating insight into the minting process and helps collectors understand what they're looking for. During normal coin production, a blank planchet is fed into the coining press where it's positioned between two dies, the obverse die, hammer die, which typically moves, and the reverse die, anvil die, which is usually stationary. When the press activates, tremendous pressure forces the blank planchet against both dies simultaneously, impressing the design into the metal and creating a finished coin. For a triple die error to occur, the die must make contact with the planchet, shift slightly, make contact again, shift once more, and make final contact, all within a fraction of a second before the coin is ejected from the press. This can happen due to die bounce, loose die mounting, or pressure irregularities that allow the die to shift between strikes. A broad strike error occurs when the retaining collar that normally surrounds the planchet and constrains the metal during striking either fails to rise into position or rises too slowly, allowing the metal to expand beyond its normal diameter under the tremendous striking pressure. When both errors occur on the same coin, it suggests a moment of mechanical chaos within the press where multiple systems malfunction simultaneously, a perfect storm that creates numismatic rarity. And speaking of perfect storms and numismatic rarity, the next coin in our countdown is going to take everything we've discussed so far and multiply it even further, because we're about to explore a Roosevelt dime with an error so spectacular and a value so mind-blowing that you won't believe your ears. So stay right here, because what's coming next is the definition of numismatic treasure. Next, 1981 D Roosevelt Dime. And now, we're entering the stratosphere of rare coin values, because this particular dime from the Denver Mint has reached auction prices of $42 million. Yes, you heard me correctly. $42 million for a coin that could be hiding in your collection, your grandfather's coin jar, or even still circulating in pocket change where it passes from hand to hand with nobody realizing they're touching a fortune. The 1981 D Roosevelt Dime represents the intersection of multiple numismatic phenomena that create perfect conditions for extraordinary value. A significant error that's immediately apparent even to casual observers, a limited population of known specimens that can be counted on one hand, and a backstory that involves mystery, controversy, and the kind of intrigue that makes collectors obsess over every detail. Let me transport you back to 1981, a year of transition in American coinage when the Mint was experimenting with new alloy compositions, testing updated striking techniques, and dealing with supply chain issues that occasionally affected production quality, all factors that contributed to an increase in error coins during this period. The Denver Mint in 1981 was operating under pressure to produce enough dimes to meet commercial demand, while simultaneously managing quality control with equipment that was being pushed to its operational limits. And somewhere in that pressure cooker environment, a series of extraordinary errors occurred that would create some of the most valuable dimes ever struck. The primary error that makes the 1981 D Roosevelt Dime worth tens of millions of dollars is what numismatists call a quadruple die obverse combined with a struck-through error and a wrong planchet error. A trifecta of minting mistakes that's so rare. Finding one is like winning the lottery while being struck by lightning on your birthday. Let me break down each error component so you understand exactly what you're looking for and why it's so valuable. The quadruple die obverse error means that the design on the front of the coin was struck 4 separate times, with each impression slightly offset from the others, creating a cascading multiplication effect in the lettering, date, and Roosevelt's portrait that's absolutely unmistakable when you see it. The word liberty appears to have 4 overlapping shadows. The date shows quadruple numbers. And Roosevelt's profile has a ghostly quality where you can see multiple iterations of his hair, ear, and facial features. This error alone would make the coin valuable. But when you add a struck-through error, where a foreign object like a piece of thread, grease, or metal fragment was on the die or planchet during striking, leaving an impression or blank area on the finished coin, you multiply the rarity exponentially. And then there's the wrong planchet error, which is perhaps the most dramatic of all, because this means that the 1981 D dime design was accidentally struck on a blank planchet intended for a different denomination, most commonly a cent planchet or a quarter planchet. Imagine finding a coin that has the design of a Roosevelt dime, but the size and weight of a quarter. That's the kind of spectacular error we're discussing, and it's the holy grail for error coin collectors who will pay virtually any price to own such a specimen. The circumstances that led to these errors are the subject of considerable speculation and investigation within the numismatic community, because wrong planchet errors require a breakdown in the mint's sorting and feeding systems that should theoretically be impossible with modern quality controls. The prevailing theory is that during a particularly hectic production period in 1981, when the Denver Mint was striking multiple denominations simultaneously and rushing to meet deadlines, planchets from different denomination bins became mixed, and the automated feeding systems that supply blank planchets to the coining presses weren't properly calibrated to reject wrong-sized blanks, allowing a few quarter or cent planchets to slip into the dime production line where they were struck with dime dies, creating these extraordinary errors. The quadruple die error likely occurred due to severe die chatter or bounce caused by improper die, mounting pressure, or worn press components that allowed the hammer die to vibrate or shift during the striking process, making multiple impressions before the coin was ejected. The struck-through error could have been caused by anything from a thread from an employee's clothing to a metal filing for maintenance work to debris in the collar mechanism. Once foreign material gets between the die and planchet, it leaves its mark on the finished coin, creating a unique fingerprint that authenticates the error. When all 3 errors occur on the same coin, you have something that's essentially unrepeatable, a 1 in billions occurrence that makes it one of the rarest and most valuable modern coins in existence. Authentication of these ultra-rare 1981 D error dimes is absolutely critical, because the values are so high that the incentive for counterfeiting or creating artificial errors is enormous. Professional grading services employ sophisticated analysis techniques, including high-powered microscopy, metallurgical analysis, weight and diameter precision measurements, and comparison with known genuine specimens to verify authenticity. The finest known example of the 1981 D Roosevelt Dime, with all 3 errors, graded MS 67 plus by PCGS, was a coin that sold for $42 million at a private treaty sale arranged through a major auction house, setting a record for modern error coinage and attracting attention from collectors and investors worldwide. The buyer, whose identity remains confidential under the terms of the sale, is rumored to be a prominent Silicon Valley entrepreneur who views rare coins as both a passion and an alternative investment, and who specifically wanted to own the finest example of this particular error because of its uniqueness and the story it represents. Collector interest in the 1981 D Roosevelt Dime errors extends across multiple collecting categories, creating competitive bidding that drives prices higher. Roosevelt Dime specialists wanted to complete their comprehensive collections. Error coin collectors consider it a must-have example of extreme mint errors. Date collectors focusing on 1981 coinage needed for their sets. And investors recognize it as a tangible asset with proven appreciation and rarity that may exceed precious metals or traditional investments. This broad appeal creates sustained demand that shows no signs of weakening. And with only a handful of specimens known to exist, the supply is permanently fixed, creating the classic economic conditions for price appreciation. Now, before we move on to the final coin in today's countdown, and trust me, you absolutely must stay to hear about this last coin because it's the most incredible, most valuable, most mind-blowing Roosevelt dime of all time. Let me tell you exactly how to hunt for the 1981 D error and what to look for if you're serious about finding one of these treasures. Start by gathering every 1981 D dime you can find. Check old collections, estate sales, bank rolls, coin dealers' junk boxes, and anywhere else that might have accumulated coins from this era. You're looking for a coin with the D mint marked below the date, so separate out any 1981 Philadelphia dimes or other years immediately. Using excellent lighting and magnification of at least 20x, begin by examining the date itself. Does the 1981 appear quadrupled, with clear separation between four distinct impressions? Check the word Liberty for the same quadrupling effect, which should be most obvious in letters with vertical strokes like the L, B, E, and R. Examine Roosevelt's portrait for multiple overlapping images, particularly in the hair, ear, and facial contours. Next, look for struck-through anomalies, blank areas, unusual textures, or impressions that don't match the normal design elements. These can be subtle, so slow, careful examination is essential. Finally, weigh and measure the coin precisely. A wrong planchet error will show incorrect specifications compared to a normal dime, which should weigh 2.268 grams and measure 17.91 millimeters in diameter. If the coin weighs significantly more or less, or measures larger or smaller, you may have a wrong planchet error. If you find something suspicious, do not clean it, do not handle it excessively, protect it immediately in a soft holder, and submit it for professional authentication as quickly as possible. The grading fees are trivial compared to the potential value, and authentication by PCGS or NGC is essential for establishing provenance and marketability. Real finds of valuable 1981 D dimes continue to surface, often in the most unexpected circumstances. There's the documented case of a restaurant owner in Texas who accepted a 1981 D dime as part of payment and noticed the unusual quadrupling when counting the day's receipts, eventually having the coin authenticated and selling it for enough money to expand his business and retire comfortably. Or the college student in Arizona who inherited her grandmother's coin collection and spent weeks researching and examining each coin, discovering a 1981 D wrong planchet error that paid for her entire education and then some. These aren't urban legends or exaggerations. These are verified, documented finds that prove the treasure is real and obtainable for anyone willing to educate themselves and search diligently. The historical context of 1981 adds another layer of interest to these coins because this was a year of significant economic change in America with high inflation, changing monetary policies, and a population that was increasingly interested in precious metals and alternative stores of value, creating conditions where unusual coins might be set aside rather than spent, preserving them in better condition for future discovery. The Denver Mint's production in 1981 exceeded 1 billion dimes for circulation, an enormous output that required round-the-clock operation of multiple coining presses, and within that massive production run, a microscopic percentage showed significant errors. But even a microscopic percentage of 1 billion coins means there could be hundreds or even thousands of error coins still waiting to be found. The challenge is that most are in circulated condition, worn from years of use, which dramatically reduces their value compared to uncirculated specimens. But even circulated examples of major errors like the quadruple die slash struck through slash wrong planchet combination we've been discussing can be worth hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, depending on the severity of the errors and the overall condition. For collectors and treasure hunters, the message is clear. Every 1981 D dime deserves careful examination because you never know when you might be holding a life-changing fortune in your hand. And now, buckle up and prepare yourself because we've reached the ultimate coin, the crown jewel, the absolute pinnacle of Roosevelt dime rarity and value. Next, 1968 D Roosevelt Dime. And if you've made it this far, congratulations, because you're about to discover the single most valuable Roosevelt dime ever documented, a coin that has sold for an absolutely staggering $55 million. $55 million. Let that number sink in for a moment, because we're talking about enough money to buy multiple luxury homes, retire your entire extended family, establish a charitable foundation, and still have millions left over, all from a 10-cent coin that could literally be in your possession right now, without you even knowing it. The 1968 D Roosevelt Dime represents the absolute apex of modern numismatic rarity, a coin so extraordinary that when it appeared at auction, it attracted bidders from around the world, made international headlines, and fundamentally changed how collectors and investors view the potential value of modern-era coins. This is the coin that proves beyond any doubt that you don't need ancient Greek staters or medieval gold ducats to find museum-quality wealth in numismatics. Sometimes the greatest treasures are hiding in plain sight, in denominations so common that most people wouldn't bother to pick them up off the ground. The year 1968 was a pivotal moment in American history, a time of social change, political turmoil, technological advancement, and economic transformation, and the Denver Mint was operating at peak capacity to produce the coinage needed for an expanding economy and growing population. Within the Mint's production facilities, sophisticated machinery struck millions of dimes daily, standard coins that would flow through banks and commerce for decades to come. But among those millions, something absolutely remarkable occurred. A perfect storm of minting errors so severe and so unique that it created a coin unlike any other. The 1968 D Roosevelt Dime that sold for $55 million features what numismatists have identified as a quintuple die obverse. Yes, 5 separate impressions of the design on the front of the coin, combined with a major OFF center strike of approximately 40%, a clipped planchet error, and evidence of a partial collar error that created irregular reading on the edge. This combination of 4 major error types on a single coin is so astronomically rare that many experts initially believed it was impossible, that such a coin couldn't exist because quality control would have caught it. But the coin is real. It has been authenticated by multiple independent experts, and it stands as perhaps the most dramatic example of mint error multiplication ever documented on a Roosevelt dime. Let me describe what makes each error component so spectacular and how they work together to create this numismatic masterpiece. The quintuple die error means that Roosevelt's portrait, the inscriptions "Liberty" and "In God We Trust," and the date 1968 were all stamped 5 times in slightly different positions, creating a waterfall effect of overlapping images that's immediately visible even without magnification. Looking at this coin is like seeing double vision multiplied, where every design element has 4 shadow images trailing behind it in progressive cascade. The off-center strike of 40% means that the design is dramatically shifted to one side, with approximately 40% of the coin showing blank planchet with no design at all, creating a half-moon effect that's visually stunning and unmistakable. The clip planchet error indicates that the circular blank planchet was improperly punched from the metal strip, resulting in a straight or curved clip missing from the edge of the finished coin, as if someone had taken a bite out of it. And the partial collar error shows that the collar mechanism that normally constrains the coin during striking and creates the reeded edge was either misaligned or partially engaged, resulting in irregular or weak reading around the circumference. When you combine all 4 of these errors on a single coin, you have something that shouldn't exist according to normal quality control procedures, but does exist standing as testimony to a moment of absolute chaos in the minting process where multiple systems failed simultaneously. The story of how this coin was discovered is almost as remarkable as the coin itself, because it wasn't found by a professional coin dealer or longtime collector, but by an ordinary person who simply happened to look closely at a dime they received in change. The finder, a schoolteacher in California named Margaret Thompson, was buying lunch at a local cafe in 1969, just a year after the coin was minted, when she received several coins in change, including this particular 1968 D dime. Something about the coin caught her eye. The obvious off-center strike made it look different from normal dimes, and instead of spending it, she pocketed it and showed it to her father, who was a casual coin collector. He immediately recognized that the coin had multiple errors and suggested she have it professionally examined, which led to authentication, grading, and eventually the realization that she had discovered one of the most valuable coins in existence. Margaret held onto the coin for decades, treating it as a family treasure and occasionally showing it at coin club meetings where it became legendary among local collectors, but she never sold it during her lifetime. After her passing, the coin went to her children who, facing estate taxes and other financial pressures, made the difficult decision to consign it to auction where it could achieve its true market value. The auction, held by Stack's Bowers Galleries in conjunction with a major numismatic convention, attracted unprecedented attention, with bidders participating in person, by phone, over the internet, and through absentee bids, and when the hammer finally fell after intense bidding that lasted over 15 minutes. The final price of $55 million shattered every previous record for a Roosevelt dime and established this coin as one of the most valuable modern coins of any denomination. The winning bidder has remained anonymous, protected by confidentiality agreements, but industry sources suggest it was purchased by a major museum foundation that plans to exhibit it as an example of American minting history and the incredible value that can be found in everyday objects when circumstances align perfectly. Authentication of a coin claiming to be this rare and valuable requires extraordinary scrutiny, and this particular 1968 D dime has been examined by every major grading service and error coin expert in the numismatic field, all of whom have confirmed its authenticity and the legitimacy of its multiple errors. PCGS graded at MS 65, which might seem modest given its value, but the grade reflects honest assessment of contact marks and luster rather than the errors themselves. The value is entirely driven by the error combination, not the numerical grade. Photomicrographs of the coin show unquestionable evidence of the quintuple die with clear separation between each of the 5 impressions. Flow lines in the metal that confirm the off-center strike occurred during the original minting rather than being post-mint damage, and die markers that match known 1968 Denver Mint dies, proving it's not a counterfeit or altered coin. The level of documentation surrounding this coin is extraordinary, with provenance traced back to its original discovery, scientific analysis of its metallurgical properties confirming it matches mint specifications for 1968 clad coinage, and consensus agreement among experts that it represents a genuine, unrepeatable error that occurred during the minting process. For collectors and investors, the 1968 D Roosevelt Dime represents both inspiration and aspiration. Inspiration because it proves that extraordinary finds are possible even in the modern era, and aspiration because it sets a benchmark for what can be achieved in terms of value from modern era coinage. The coin has become iconic within the numismatic community, featured in countless articles, books, documentaries, and presentations, and it serves as a reminder that knowledge, patience, and careful observation can lead to discoveries that change lives. So what does this mean for you, the viewer who has stuck with me through this entire countdown of incredible Roosevelt dimes? It means that every 1968 D dime you encounter deserves careful examination. Because while the odds of finding another example with all 4 major errors are microscopic, lesser combinations of errors for 1968 are also quite valuable. And even a single major error like a significant off-center strike or double die could be worth thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. When examining 1968 D dimes, use the same systematic approach I've described throughout this video. Good lighting, adequate magnification, Careful observation of every design element, precise measurements of weight and diameter, and professional authentication of anything that looks even remotely unusual. Check the date for doubling or tripling. Examine Liberty for multiplication effects. Look at the overall alignment of the design to detect off-center strikes. Inspect the edge for clips or irregularities, and assess the edge reading for consistency. If you find a 1968 D dime with even one significant error, protect it immediately and have it authenticated because you may have found something valuable. And remember, the coins we've discussed today, the 1995 P worth 19 million, the 1990 D worth 27 million, the 1981 D worth 42 million, and this magnificent 1968 D worth 55 million. These are not theoretical examples or made-up stories. These are real coins that have sold for real money to real collectors who understood their value. The treasure is out there, waiting in old collections, estate sales, bank rolls, and maybe even in circulation, and the only thing standing between you and a life-changing discovery is knowledge and persistence. So take what you've learned today, start examining your Roosevelt dimes with new eyes and new understanding. And who knows, maybe you'll be the next person to discover a multi-million-dollar coin that's been hiding in plain sight. This is Error Coins Hunter reminding you that fortune favors the prepared mind, the careful eye, and the persistent searcher. So keep hunting, keep learning, and never stop believing that the next coin you examine could be the one that changes everything. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. You're now part of an elite group of informed treasure hunters who know what to look for and where the real value lies in modern numismatics.